Well, good morning. It's really, really good to see you today and to be able to be here and worship with you. Let's see how tangled up I'm going to get right now. Okay, made it work. It's just really a joy to be able to be here. When we booked this series, it's been, well over a year ago now. It was one of those things that as soon as Brother Don asked, would you be willing to come and hold a meeting for us? I said, yes. Whatever I have to move off the calendar, yes, is my answer. And I'm glad that it didn't get canceled. And I'm glad that we get to be able to spend this time together. I think I say this every time I come to Temple Terrace, that it feels like coming home to me. And I mean that every single time. There are just so many of you that I look around and right now you've taken your mask off, I can tell who you are. And I'm very thankful for the influence that you have been on my life. And that's an influence that's continued for, I think I met some of you 15 years ago, right? Does that make you feel old? It does me. It's probably, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I did. So there you go. But it's been a joy to know you, and it's been a good thing for me in so many ways. I think the last time that I was here, I'm pretty sure, was February of 2019, around Lectures Week at the college, and some stuff has changed with the Lankford family since then. So those of you who know us, I may as well go ahead and tell you what it is. We have had another baby. His name is Truett. It has no connection to Truex. Don't listen to that. That's propaganda from the guy. Don't listen. But his name is Truett, so we have 3 boys now. And then recently this year, we have also moved. We moved in April, just as all the shutdown stuff was getting in full swing. We moved out to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And to use Paul's words, I'm no longer getting my living from the gospel. I'm working for Chick-fil-A now, and I love it. And I'm just having a blast. And so we're doing that, but we're very involved already with our new congregation, our new church family out there, and intend to stay that way. I'm still getting plenty of opportunities to teach, and here I am preaching. This is the first time since April that I've been in a pulpit, and I'm thankful for that too. So it's just, I don't know. Stuff happens, it's just life. It rolls on for everybody, I guess, and it has for us. But it's nice to have some things that are reliable and that are familiar, and that's where we are today. It's reliable and it's familiar, and I'm glad to be able to be with you today. It's always, I want to say this too publicly, that it is always a sincere joy to be able to come and spend a little bit of time with Brother Kerry and with Brother Don and with Brother Jonathan. I love these guys. They are tremendous servants of the kingdom, great Bible students, and just enormously helpful influences on me. And so I'm very, very thankful to be able to be with them and just to be here with you. So thank you so much for making the time to be here today and for your attentive ear as we study the things of God. Lots of people have tried this. You can find videos of it on YouTube. It's an experiment where you put on a pair of goggles that will make you see the entire world upside down. And everything is inverted. And what people do, and by the way, you can buy your own pair of these if you really want to try this. These are available to you from an Etsy shop for $102. You can buy your own pair and you can try this. You put them on, you wear them every waking moment. And you wait to see if you will learn how to function in the world when you are seeing the world upside down. It's a remarkable experiment to watch. It's hilarious and also very impressive because the first couple hours, it works exactly like you would probably expect. That the simplest little tasks like taking a pitcher of water and pouring it into a glass become impossible when the water is going that way in your view. You can't figure out what your brain tells you to do this, but then it's upside down again. And it's so funny to watch people try to do that or to try to reach for a doorknob on the wrong side of the door or something like that. So funny to watch. And they just are baffled by everything, even in their own house where they're familiar with all of it. But after the hilarious stage has passed, again, you do need to go watch these videos. It's remarkable that after about maybe 3 to 5 to 7 days, most people are able to learn how to function completely normally in the world with everything being shown to them upside down. It's actually pretty remarkable to think of the power of the human mind, that it can compensate for something as dramatic as everything you know being flipped. That your mind can compensate and learn not only to tolerate that, but actually to function well in that environment. It's a really cool thing to watch. Now, the other cool thing about it is as soon as the experiment is over, when they take the goggles off of the people who've been wearing them for a week or more, suddenly they have to wobble a little bit because the world looks upside down anew to them. And after about an hour, everything snaps back into place and the brain functions and takes over the way that it always has, and all is good. But it's a remarkable little experiment. And I think it gives us a pretty profound insight into the way that we view reality through the filter of knowing Jesus Christ and of being a servant of the Almighty God. You can see the connection, right? Because when we first put on Christ, what happens to our worldview? What happens to our estimation of reality? Well, some things are still the same. I mean, you still live in the same house the day after you're baptized. You still are around a lot of the same people. Most of us still went to the same job the day after we were baptized. But there are a few things about life that suddenly seem completely upside down from the way that they were before, the day before even. There are a few things that living for Christ compels us to think about and to say and to do, and ways that we respond to people that we didn't do that before. And it doesn't seem natural. It's baffling for a little while. But given enough time, and those sort of things start to become the norm. They start, in fact, to become not an upside-down view of the world, but the real right way up view of the world. And we start to realize that we had it wrong all along. Now, the interesting thing about that is that to the people of the world, they will still look at us and say, "What's wrong with you? You have it all upside down. You have turned the world, in fact, upside down." To which we respond, yes. Yes, we have. Because that's exactly what God has called us to do. And so I want to show you in this series and in our studies through the rest of our time today through Wednesday, I want to show you in our studies some of the ways that God has called us to that upside down view of reality. And some of the ways that we will be much better off if we learn to view the world the way He has taught us to view it. Even though the world will decry us as being insane or old-fashioned or out of sync with history or something like that, we understand that the view that God teaches us to take of reality, while it is upside down to them, it is everything that it should be for us. And this morning, I want to show you that God has been doing that for His people for a long time. In fact, this morning, I want to show you that as far back as the 10 Commandments, God has been teaching His people to take a view of the world that seems upside down so that we can actually view the world right side up. And I want you to turn your Bibles this morning over to Exodus chapter 20. I want to show you the entirety of the 10 Commandments to start and a couple of principles about them. And then I want to really hone in on commandment number 1 this morning. And I want to show you how that one, really more than any of the others, can turn our view of the world upside down in just the way that it should, in order for us to live in reality the way God meant for us to. So, we're going to take Paul's advice to Timothy. We're going to begin with the public reading of Scripture, and then we'll talk about the first of the 10 Commandments. I'm beginning in Exodus chapter 20, not in verse 3, but in verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord God made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. And therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. It's interesting to me, simple as they sound, those 10 principles serve as the foundation for over 600 other commandments that you will read in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. 600 other commandments, and they're all based on those 10 foundational commandments. And not only are those 10 commandments strong enough to support the weight of the other 600 in the law of Moses, but all 10 of them, yes, including the Sabbath, have principles that endure on into our covenant with God in Christ. All 10 of them have principles that reach forward and govern the way that we live before God as well. And so they have stood the test of time for good reason, because their principles are eternal. And there are two foundational facts that make that work. Both of them can be found in the first 2 verses of Exodus chapter 20. So let me just point those out to you from the text very quickly before we get to the first commandment. The first one is who these commandments are from. Take a look again where I started reading in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 1. Who are these commandments from? The text says, "And God spoke all these words." These 10 ideas are not from Moses. He didn't come up with those. They're not from a brain trust of anti-Egypt revolutionaries that figured out, we left, we need to figure out what we're going to be now. It's not like that. It's not from the most highly regarded philosophers of the day that just put their heads together and said, what's the best society we can think of? It's not that. Exodus 20 and verse 1, God spoke all these words. They're really, really important. When that's the opening and that's the intro to these 10 ideas, you know that something is important. Something important is about to be said. And the second idea that I think is foundational to understanding why they are so powerful and why we're still studying them sitting here in 2020 is when these 10 commandments were spoken. By the time they get to Mount Sinai, where God is talking to them at this point, they have only been freed from their slavery in Egypt for 2 months. They have just become a free people. Now, since they are, and since we know that they are like every other human nation, they have the same tendencies and temptations as we all do, it's pretty easy to guess what would happen to them without some sort of regulation, without some sort of governance, and without some sort of sense of purpose to who they should be as a freed people. Because without some sort of direction and governance, every people that has been enslaved and receives their freedom pretty quickly become slaves again, just to a different master, usually to our own impulses, which is extremely unhealthy. But they need something, right? This is a crucial moment for them. And so at this crucial moment, they receive a crucial word from God. And it's the fact that it is so crucially timed and so authoritatively spoken that makes the 10 Commandments worth our study. Since it is true that God spoke these words, and since it is true that He spoke them in order to help people who have recently been freed to stay free, it makes perfect sense why the first commandment in the bunch says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Now, I'm going to put pause on the thought process real quick right there for just a second, because that's where we normally start the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me, Exodus 20, verse 3. However, I don't think commandment number 1 is meant to start with those words, even though in English, in the grammar, that's the first thing that is technically commanded in the 10 Commandments. I think the beginning of the thought is in verse 2. That in verse 2, it begins with these words saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me." That, brothers and sisters, is what I believe the entirety of the first commandment is supposed to be. And when you see the context of the whole statement, it becomes easy to see that we have at least two things going on here. We have an indicative and an imperative. I'm sorry for the semi-snooty vocabulary right there, but it's helpful in this case. It's helpful, okay? The indicative is a statement of what is. That's what an indicative is. The imperative is a statement of what should be. So you have a truth, if this, then this. It's that kind of logic, okay? And so I want to show you I want to lead us through a little bit of an investigation of both. All right, so here we go. The indicative and the imperative. Let's start with the indicative. This is the seemingly simple statement that begins the whole thing when God says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the house of slavery, out of the land of Egypt. This is the most foundational idea in the whole of the Ten Commandments. Really, Dan? That's what you think it is? Absolutely. This is the most foundational idea in the whole of the Ten Commandments, and also the most foundational idea to the first imperative there. God begins this whole set by saying, I am Yahweh your God. And we may not realize it at first glance, but in just saying that, God has already said essentially the rest of the commandment. He's already said to them, I must be your only God. You remember what the name Yahweh means, right? Remember that from Moses at the burning bush when he asked God, when I go to the people of Israel and I'm going to lead them out of slavery in Egypt, and they ask me, who sent you? What name shall I tell them? And God gives His name. It is Yahweh, I am. Tell them that I am has sent you. It's actually a really powerful concept built into that name. And it doesn't come across in English the same way that it would in Hebrew. I mean, we don't have this eternal tense that worked in Hebrew for God to be able to say that, because our verbs of being, it's like we're not even capable of thinking about that, right? Because you am in this room right now, right? You are. That was right, wasn't it? Some of you cringed. It's probably going to get worse, okay? But you am in this moment. You am in this room. You have a place and a time. You have existence that started and it will stop someday. But God has none of those things, because God isn't just in a place. He isn't just in a time, whether past, present, or future. God just is. And when you look at the scope of humanity and you look at the history of religion all throughout human existence, has there ever been a God in any culture that was without an origin story? Has there ever been a God that just is in the way that God says, I am? And the answer is no. Go back through the annals of history. They all tell the stories of how their gods came to be. But there is no story of how God, Jehovah, came to be, because He just is. And this is why this is why He begins with His name, and this is why, in just beginning with His name, He has already made the statement that He is utterly unique and that He alone deserves to be worshiped. Which means just by the fact that God says, I am who I am, He has already precluded the possibility of any other gods being before Him. I am who I am, and therefore you shall have no other gods before me. And then there's the rest of the indicative, which I think is really special too, because you keep looking at verse 2 when God introduces the Ten Commandments right there, and He doesn't just say, I am Yahweh your God, I created the world, you better listen to me or else. Right? He doesn't just begin with, I'm big and you're tiny, so be obedient. He begins with a story, short one, but a powerful one. I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of Egypt, who brought you out of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. It's not just the statement, I'm big and you're small, be obedient or I'll step on you and squash you like bugs. It's not that kind of a relationship, because God cares about His people. He is a redeeming God. He is a God who has concern for His people. And brothers and sisters, you want to talk about why we should have no other gods before Him? It's because He is the only God about whom that is true. Yahweh is the only God who truly gives people freedom when they serve Him. All other gods will enslave us again. All other gods will make us captives, sometimes to ourselves, sometimes to their changing ways and constantly shifting priorities, but they will all enslave us again, but not Yahweh our God. He is the one God who loves freedom because He loves His people, and He gives it as a gift. And that is the reason that the imperative of commandment number 1 makes sense. I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You could almost insert a therefore right here. Therefore, you shall have no other gods before me. Now, just in saying that, there are two ideas functioning right there as well. The first is a contrast. That there should be no other gods before Him means that there should be no other gods that the people worship and esteem as greater than God. No other gods who are greater than Yahweh, their God. And the comparison factor of that means that there are no other gods who can be worshipped alongside Yahweh, their God. Because there are no other gods who are equal with Yahweh, who sits enthroned in the heavens. The command that's given then to the people of Israel here in the first of the 10, and really it's more than a command given to Israel, it's a principle that is taught to all of God's people in all time. The principle is that their words, our actions, our money, our family lives, our time, our worship, our adoration, and our whole hearts belong solely to Yahweh God. This, by the way, is why Judaism is held up as the class example of what is called monotheism. Mono, one, theism, the belief in God. Therefore, put it together, the belief in one God. Judaism is the ancient class example of that, and we have carried that legacy rightly. Through being Christians, we carry that legacy of believing only in the God who has revealed Himself to us, to them at Sinai and to us in Jesus Christ on Zion. We carry that legacy of being monotheistic people because we believe in the supremacy, in the eternal existence, and in the grace upon grace of one God who is above all. Biblical Christians are still firmly committed to the truth that God Himself spoke, that I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. So does the first of the 10 Commandments, does it have relevance in our lives living in this place, in this time? Yes. Yes, it does. And we know that because we get warnings all through the New Testament that tell us to abstain from idolatry, to flee from idolatry, to resist the temptation to worship idols. One church is commended because when they became Christians, they walked away from their idols. That's the Thessalonians. And so we know that it's an important thing that we abstain from all of those. And we are warned, I think, constantly in reading those, not to give our time bowing down to statues. And I know that sounds like a piece of encouragement for an ancient primitive culture in some way, but can I just remind you that sort of thing happens all over the face of this earth at the present time. And it happens here in your own city, and it happens in our city. Because there are people that still devote themselves to the worship of actual idols, of statues. And we just need to be reminded that that's not acceptable in the sight of God. But that said, can I tell you what I think are the much more dangerous idols that we're tempted to worship? I think the much more dangerous idols that we're tempted to worship really not that different from worshiping an actual statue. But it's the things that our society tempts us to elevate to God's status. that we worship and that we are tempted to worship. I think even with minimal reflection on our own lives and on our culture in general, it's easy to see that we live in and we live around a world that still has a major problem obeying the first of the 10 Commandments. And there are a couple of well-worn paths that we could use to talk about how that plays out. A couple of them from my preacher that was around in my home congregation during my formative years, especially in middle school and high school. Whenever he would talk about idolatry, he would talk about how the amount of time that we spend in front of our TVs, staring into the electronic abyss, is akin to the amount of time that other cultures would spend in the temples of their gods, serving those. And you know what? There's something to be made out of that. There's something to be said for that. We can make the same application for how much time we spend with our phones and our tablets right in front of us, right? We can make the same application. I can remember him also talking in those times about how different people would devote themselves entirely too much to their career and the amassing of wealth, and that would become an idol for them, especially when it interfered with the time that they should be spending in worship with the people of God. And you know what? His point to be made there too. There's something valid in that. But can I add to that and maybe go a little bit of a different direction than he would have gone with that by pointing out that it's not so much, I don't think our problem is so much in this time period with the methods and the places that we have turned into other gods, as much as it is the ideas that we have elevated to God's status. Or at least, let me be gracious here and say the ideas that we are tempted to elevate to God's status. So for instance, I think in our culture we are especially tempted to serve the gods of status and popularity. Now, these gods are powerful in our time, as they are in plenty of others. And these gods are served by some powerful underlings as well, like the god of non-confrontation, the god of acquiescence, the god of cowardice. When we have an opportunity to serve our God and to be seen doing that, and we cower back, because we have served the gods of wanting to be seen by other people as being good in some way. The gods of status and popularity are also served by the underlings, the gods of sexual immorality, of status and sexiness, the god of good health, good hair, and good humor. I don't know anything about good hair, but whatever. But we're tempted to serve these idols, and our temptation to serve them, to worship them, it runs deep. In little things and in big things, the temptations are present. And so we have to be aware, and we have to make sure that God, Yahweh, is our God, and we only serve Him. Second group we're tempted to serve is the gods of safety and comfort. When we want Christianity to be a peaceful and quiet life, we don't want to take any risks. We want to make sure that everything is comfortable. That's what Christianity is supposed to give us, is something comfortable, right? Well, can I remind you, brothers and sisters, that in the passage that uses that phrase about leading a peaceful and quiet life, what that passage says is that we should pray for our leaders, that they will give us the opportunity to live a peaceful and quiet life. It does not say that we should pursue a peaceful and quiet life. What we should pursue, brothers and sisters, is Yahweh God. And if He blesses us with a peaceful and quiet life, then good. But if not, we still will pursue Him. There have been plenty of Christians throughout history that have lived through lives, who lived through events that were anything but peaceful and quiet. And yet they served their God faithfully because they were unwilling to bow to the idols of comfort and safety. Add to that we are tempted to serve the gods of entertainment and pleasure in our culture. And you can see this in the way that we want everything to be engaging that we do, right? It's kind of like people that say, I hate running unless I'm chasing a ball, right? I don't want to run unless I'm chasing a basketball or I'm running out to catch football, because otherwise I just get so bored with running because it's not interesting. Well, first of all, I'm just going to say this. What's the matter with you? Okay? Because I really like it. So that makes me think something's wrong with you. That's the way that works. But that's harmless enough, right? That's harmless enough in the realm of athletics. But what if we take that same thought process and we put it in the realm of worship? well, I don't want to just go to church just for the sake of going. I get bored. I don't want to go unless there's going to be something exciting, something engaging, something super relevant. I don't want to go unless there's going to be something for the kids, unless there's going to be something for the grown-ups. I don't want to go unless there's going to be this, and this that's engaging. Well, I don't think that's healthy. Because that's what we're pursuing, our focus is on that. And that means that necessarily our focus is not on God Himself. And when that's the case, what we have done is make an idol out of entertainment and pleasure and engagement. Serving the real God is hard sometimes for various reasons, but it is hard. But don't turn and serve another God just because he is more entertaining and more pleasant. Now, ultimately, all of these come down to the same thing, right? All of those come down to the same thing. We all come down to the fact that when we serve another God other than Yahweh God, we are ultimately serving the God self. In every case, when we choose to elevate our choices, our preferences above the pursuit of God's preferences, of His way, what we are choosing to do is worship the God self. And so one of my mentors, whom you know well, is wont to say that an idol is anything that holds your heart. And he's 100% right about that. Whether it's someone else's love or some amount of money or some status or some job or some health level or some sense of adventure, again, engagement, excitement, whether it's any of those things, anything that we treasure in this life more than we treasure our service to God is an idol that is interfering with our service to God. And it will always, every single time, it will always distract us from the true freedom and blessing that we could have in worshiping Yahweh alone. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, there's one more way that we can find ourselves falling short of the great spiritual mandate that God gave Israel in that first commandment, and that by extension He has given to us. And it's the reason that I've chosen to preach this lesson right now. That of all things in the whole Bible that you could talk about in this moment, Dan, why did you go to the 10 Commandments? Well, here's the reason. There's another facet of idolatry of which we need to be aware. Because it's for sure, yes, that we are tempted to serve other gods, as I just mentioned. But in addition to that, brothers and sisters, we are seriously tempted to heed the voices of other gods. We are tempted to give the attention of our ears and our hearts to other gods. And whether we like to admit it or not, I know from my own experience, this is just me telling you what my spiritual walk looks like. I know that it's tempting to put more stock in and give more attention to the world's voices than to God's voice. Which is a crying shame, really, that I'm tempted to even do that. Because when the apostles set out into the world, Paul stated it as their goal that they wanted to take every thought captive to Christ. Every thought that people think, they want it to be brought under His control, to be filtered through what God wants for those people. And that ought to be our goal in this world as well. We are the light of the world. We are a city set on a hill. Our goal is to bring every thought captive to Christ in the people that we know that are around us. But we are not going to be successful in doing that if we can't bring our own thoughts to be fully captive to Jesus Christ and to God. Instead, what we often do and what we are tempted to do is to let our thoughts be taken captive by the gods who will bring us into captivity and who will give us confusion and who will only show us darkness, who will lead us through places where hope is not only difficult to see, but it's gone. It's gone. And ultimately, they will lead us into places where the only thing that we can find is fear. This is what the other gods of the world will give us. But the good news, phrase used on purpose, is that when we take our eyes off of those gods, when we look to the one God who has reliably promised to teach us the truth, to give us comfort, to give us peace and hope, and maybe the one that we all crave the most desperately right now, He has promised us joy. When we look to Him, we receive those blessings, not because we seek the blessings, but because we seek the God who will give the blessings. Christians, above all people, should be able to rise above the fog of fear. When we give ourselves to our fears, brothers and sisters, we're not giving ourselves to Yahweh God. We must then make sure that we have no other gods before Him. Now, Dan, does that mean, are you saying that we shouldn't feel afraid of what might happen in a time like we're living in right now? Dan, are you saying that we shouldn't be concerned about what a worldwide pandemic might do to our society or what racial hostility in our country might bring about for us? Does that mean that we shouldn't be afraid of losing money or jobs or status or the peaceful world that we're used to living in? Is that what it means, Dan? Yes. Yes. That's what it means, brothers and sisters. It means that we serve the God who has promised us good. And we stand in a long line of people who have decided not to put their faith in other gods who promise them good things but can't deliver on those promises. We stand on the shoulders of an untold myriad of faithful ones who have kept the first of the 10 Commandments since ancient times. They have lived in the shadow of world wars. They have lived through global famines. They've lived through more severe plagues than we're watching right now. They've lived through persecution for their faith, crumbling empires, natural disasters that are too many to number, and through all of it, they have kept the first commandment that says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And God bless them for it. And God bless us with the strength to hold up their legacy. Now, does that mean that we should be careless and we shouldn't pay attention to what's going on in the world and we shouldn't prepare for the things that life might throw at us? No, it doesn't mean that. Make the necessary preparations. Live with wisdom in the world as God has taught you to, okay? But don't do that out of paranoia. Don't do that out of a fear of everything falling apart and it all just becoming awful. God is still on His throne, brothers and sisters. And that throne hasn't even budged through all of this stuff that we've faced in this very weird year. He still sits on His throne. And so we uphold the legacy of our ancient brothers and sisters. We want to make sure that we live that out. And so as Rachel blessed the house of her father by removing the idols from it, as Gideon blessed his hometown by tearing down the altar to Baal, as Josiah blessed the land by burning the sanctuaries of other gods that were scattered throughout Israel, and as Jesus blessed the temple by throwing out the big business that had been idolized there, we will have blessed families when we rid our homes of the worship of any god except Yahweh. We will have blessed cities and societies when we rid people's lives of their hopeless faith in other gods. And we will have blessed lives when we rid our own hearts of our faithfulness to any god except Yahweh alone. Jesus said that the most important commandment is that you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and with all of your mind and with all of your strength. His commandment, the one that He said is the most important, it echoes the same sentiment and the same theology of the first of the great commandments. And if we are willing to heed it, it will set us free from the bondage of hopelessness and fear. And so remember this. Remember throughout all of your life when He said, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. May God give His people strength to keep that principle alive today and in every generation as long as the world stands. Amen? That's what we're about, brothers and sisters. And that is what seeing the world upside down is going to take for us. There's a story in the Old Testament about when the prophet Isaiah got a glimpse of God's throne in the temple on Zion. It's in Isaiah chapter 6. And the beginning of the story sets the historical stage for what's going on. Isaiah tells us that it was in the year that King Uzziah died. Now, King Uzziah was a good man. He sat on the throne for a very long time. And so you know, as with every people group, as with every nation, when a throne that's been occupied by one person for a long time goes empty, there's going to be some uneasiness about what's going to happen next, right? But the opening to the story in Isaiah chapter 6, it says, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up. Yeah, the king of the earth is gone. The king on this earth is gone. But Yahweh is still on His throne. And brothers and sisters, Yahweh is still on His throne. And thank God that He is. This morning, if you're at a point where you are ready to give your life to Him in such a way that you will serve Him only and you will have no other gods before Him, and I would love to talk to you about what that means, about what's involved in that, and about how that starts. And so if you want to talk to somebody about that, you can come and find me down here at the front as we're standing together and singing this hymn.